The Institute most recently finished its 46th General Chapter, which brought together 70 elected brother delegates from around the world to discuss, consider, plan, and make decisions about the future of the Lasallian mission and its priorities. This was the 46th time since 1694 that the brothers have met to decide their future. At this General Chapter, there were also 13 consultors appointed by the Superior General, and I was one of these. Other consultors included representatives from the International Council for Lasallian Association and the Educational Mission, the Young Lasallians, the Young Brothers, and similar groups in the Institute. Consultors participated fully in the General Chapter, although we were not voting members. During the chapter, I kept a daily blog that provides many of the details. And if you're interested in such details, then it's available on Amazon. You will undoubtedly hear more about this General Chapter and its decisions in the near future. But for this session, I want to share some of my observations about the experience, and perhaps some insights into parts of it that may help you think more deeply and personally about how our shared Lasallian identity can be lived out in your own personal context, especially when it comes to this notion of association or association for mission. Every General Chapter produces lots of documents, although this one produced relatively few. You will soon see these published. Here, however, I will share 5 insights that I gained from the experience, along with a couple of the well-defined commitments from the 7 interest groups, who together produced over 30 commitments overall. My first observation is that the process we used during this General Chapter was radically different from any previous chapter in our history. The preparatory committee had planned things well, especially since they had an extra year to prepare due to the delays caused by the pandemic. Instead of the more formal process used at previous chapters, the 3 weeks were facilitated by a Salesian sister who led us through something called appreciative inquiry, by which we mined our own experience and knowledge to first bring forth and identify the things that we were doing well, not the problems. Through a variety of exercises, we gradually moved to identifying key words, central goals, achievable dreams, and the kinds of results that we were envisioning. It was only during the last week that we moved to what were called paths of transformation. This is a fancy way of describing the things needed to reach the vision that we had come to define and understand better. There were times, however, when I personally thought that we were spending a lot of time thinking and talking. It's probably my American bias. Eventually, we broke into groups to write statements with 3 elements. Number 1, recognizing and describing a certain reality. Number 2, describing what we are called to do in response to that reality. And number 3, specifying the commitments that would help make that response happen. It was those last stage commitments that were the final practical product of our work. And I have to say that all the discussions and exercises and conversations that we had before that last stage were very helpful in putting us in a place where we could fairly quickly and clearly produce that last document. The second observation is that the inclusion of the consultors, which included 2 Lasallian women and other Lasallian partners, was a valuable aspect in this chapter's success. Those new voices, which, by the way, no one questioned or found strange or awkward, brought an added dimension to the chapter's conversations and discussions. It was as if someone had opened a new window a crack. These participants in a general chapter who were not brothers introduced new ideas, different perspectives, gentle but serious questions, and credible ideas born of long experience and strong Lasallian commitment. Everyone respected the fact that this was essentially a brother's body that had its own integrity. And I think that everyone came to see that a wider and more diverse conversation in this context was appropriate, laudable, and beneficial to everyone concerned. A third observation is that the Lasallian world is more diverse than most of us know or realize. There is, of course, the diversity of cultures, educational systems, and social patterns. But what also stood out to me was the fact that there were diverse priorities in how delegates from different cultures handled the making of decisions, or the priorities they found important. Concern about details may be very important in one culture, but much less important in another. Some groups thought clarity of expression was essential, while for others it was the ultimate goal that was the most important. The lesson here is that it pays to pay attention to these kinds of cultural differences, because otherwise it may not be possible to move forward in coming to a decision or creating a final statement. The experience validated what I had read years before in the book The Culture Map, which focuses on exactly this significant factor in international relations. A fourth observation is about the larger context for a gathering such as this. When you have a group of significant Lasallian leaders and brothers together in one place, the social aspect of their lives deserves appropriate attention. This is a nice way of saying that I wish that the chapter had been 4 weeks instead of 3 weeks, and that the first week had been spent learning one another's names, sharing cultural highlights, and getting to know one another on a social level before jumping into very long days of working together. After a few weeks, some of this happened nevertheless, and there were some great ad hoc opportunities to socialize in the evenings. But it was a lost opportunity not to have intentionally facilitated an initial deeper social awareness of one another. I believe that this would have not only enriched a deeper appreciation of our shared community identity as brothers and partners, with those very significant partners included, but it would also have brought a next level to our deliberations and decisions. My final and fifth observation or insight is at the opposite end of the previous one. Those who were at the 46th General Chapter uniformly knew what it meant to be part of the Lasallian family and came with long experience in Lasallian contexts. All had been in leadership positions of some kind. They knew how to pay attention to people and had the disposition to interact with others. Therefore, when individuals from different Lasallian regions met one another, it was as if long-lost relatives had been discovered. More than a common interest, they shared a common passion for Lasallian education and a common personal Christian faith commitment, lived through education and in community. And so connections were made very quickly, and at a deeper level than might have happened in other circumstances. This gem of community, as de La Salle called it, was able to shine out during the 3 brief weeks of the General Chapter. There was an enthusiasm and genuine joy in being able to be together doing something that lay at the center of who we were. And this alone made it very memorable. When it comes to examples of what was considered and approved, it is difficult to choose just two. First, it's good to remember that the General Chapter dealt largely with the life of the brothers. It was the International Assembly of the Lasallian Educational Mission, IMEL for short, that met last year. They're the ones that provided 9 goals for the Lasallian mission, and these were submitted to the General Chapter. These were then acknowledged and validated by the chapter delegates at one of its sessions. When the delegates of IMEL, all Lasallian partners and brothers, meet for their second session at the end of October, they will come up with action items that will bring those 9 goals to realization. For example, one goal is aimed at strengthening association structures that promote new models of community, such as intentional communities that share the mission, life, spirituality, and faith, and that foster belonging, commitment, and association. We will have to wait until after the next meeting to see what this will look like on the ground. In terms of the brothers' life, one of the more interesting commitments said that the brothers should leave our comfort zones and make the peripheries our home, so that new communities and ministries that are created go in that direction. There was a real interest in following the example and direction of Pope Francis, who has urged all of us to go out to meet people where they live and not just wait until they come to us. In his talk to us during the papal audience that we had with him at the end of the General Chapter, he also reminded us of the importance of being a witness, a genuine presence to others. The Christian educator in the school of Christ is first of all a witness, and he or she is a teacher to the extent that he is a witness. I have nothing to teach you in this regard, but only as a brother, I want to remind you, witness. And above all, I pray for you that you may be brothers not only in name, but also in fact. And for your schools to be Christian not in name, but in fact. It reminded me of a phrase by a great Jewish educator who said that the person who stands in front of a classroom is either a witness or a stranger. A witness or a stranger. They must stand for what they believe and teach, because their witness sometimes teaches much more than can be planned for or observed. So those are just a couple of things to think about. During the next 6 to 9 months, I'm sure that there will be many other reports of documents, from both the General Chapter and from IMEL, and these will be made available. These will be a rich resource for faculty discussions or school-wide conversations. They should become the handbook for moving the Lasallian mission forward for the next 7 years. As an appropriate conclusion for this session, we have asked Brother Armin Luistro, the newly elected Superior General of the Institute, to share some of his thoughts about the future of the Lasallian mission.
The 46th General Chapter urges us, challenges all of us, partners and brothers, to look into the future with hope, but also with great audacity. What is the most critical, what is the key to the 46th General Chapter? This reminds me of that rabbinic story where the rabbi asked his disciples, when do we know that the dawn has come? Of course, the disciples ventured at many different answers. One said, maybe when you can distinguish between a white thread and a black thread, dawn has come. The rabbi said, no. The other ventured at another answer. Maybe when you could see the silhouette of a tree against the horizon, then perhaps dawn has arrived. There were many other different answers, but you may have known the story. The rabbi then shares his wisdom to his disciples. He says, when you can look into the eyes of a stranger, an other, and see a brother or a sister, then it is dawn. Until then, it is still night. I might as well look at this rabbinic story and hope that in your discussions, in your prayers, in your dreaming, you may begin to see the light of dawn. May the light of dawn be our guide towards the future. Pope Francis has been speaking about how divided our world has become and how very different it is now, despite the connectivity of technology, travel. We are still a very broken world. And I think that's at the very heart. Our identity as Lasallians can be found and anchored deep into that fraternity that De La Salle discovered is a gift from God. When brothers can look into the eyes of another brother coming from another district with a different language and brought up in a totally strange culture and say, brother, you are my brother, the dawn has come. When a Lasallian partner can look into the eyes of the other and see and say deeply, sister, you are my soul sister. We can walk hand in hand and commit ourselves towards this Lasallian mission. Then the dawn has arrived. When there are no more barriers between brothers and partners, between seniors and the young, between one district or the other, when cultures, geography, age, and all those that break our world are now part of who we are, then we have allowed the 46th General Chapter to be among us. That is God's kingdom on earth. Dear friends, if there is one word that characterizes the experience, the hope, as well as the resolutions of the 46th General Chapter, you can find that in our Lasallian fraternity. That is also the message of Pope Francis to the world, and that is his special message to all Lasallians on this very occasion. Let us live our brotherhood. Let us be sister and brother to each other. Let us live our Lasallian mission by walking hand in hand, dreaming with, conversing, and becoming a real Lasallian sister or brother to one another. If we are able to do that despite our human frailty, we would have lived our Lasallian vocation to the full. Sisters and brothers, animo.
The next step is yours. With this input, what do you find most important in your own professional or personal context? And what is it that you find most challenging or perhaps uncomfortable? In discussions and sharing with your colleagues, explore some of these things a little more deeply. As we know from our long experience, such conversations in community not only benefit our own thinking and actions, but they influence and guide that of others. Finally, it is this dimension of our Lasallian mission, the together and by association piece, that ends up being the most transformative and the most important.